Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Since Mr Corbyn became Labour leader in 2015, the party's policy on nuclear weapons has been thrown into doubt in a way not seen since Labour abandoned unilateralism in 1989. Jeremy Corbyn's opposition to Britain's atomic arsenal is nothing new. He's a long-standing member of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, CND, and indeed served as the organisation's vice president until last year. But the Labour Party's policy is quite clear. Excuse me. The manifesto states Labour supports the renewal of the Trident nuclear deterrent. However, in a BBC interview in 2015, the Labour leader himself said that it is immoral to have or use nuclear weapons. I've made that clear all my life. Asked whether he would use Trident, Jeremy Corbyn said no. And last July, the Labour leader voted against his own party's policy of renewing Trident in a key parliamentary vote. Only last month, Mr Corbyn told the Andrew Marr Show that there would be no first use of it, meaning Trident. We're joined now by Conservative MP, Julian, well, was MP, we'll see if he is again after June the 8th, Julian Lewis. He's chairman of the Defence Select Committee. And the Shadow Minister for Peace and Disarmament, Fabian Hamilton. Peter Hennessy is an expert on Britain's nuclear deterrent. He's with us too. Fabian Hamilton, it would be fair to say that the party's policy on renewing Trident is not the policy that Mr Corbyn would want. Is that fair?
That's very fair, and it's not the policy I would want, but it is the policy that Parliament's agreed, and it is the policy of the Labour Party, so we have to accept that.
But given that, above all, it is the Prime Minister who is in charge of Britain's nuclear deterrent, and quite often its use, if it ever came to that, would not be a cabinet matter. The buck really stops with the Prime Minister. Is it a credible deterrent if the man in charge has said he won't use it?
Well, I don't think it's a credible deterrent in any case, whatever the circumstances, but that's my personal view. The fact is we are rebuilding the Dreadnought-class submarines. Parliament has agreed that. The Labour Party policy is to support that, and that's what's going ahead. I would hope no Prime Minister, Labour, Conservative or anybody else would ever dream of using these appalling weapons because they destroy every living creature on Earth.
What happened to the days when political parties took such clear decisions on such matters of vital national interest and individuals didn't agree with it, so they resigned? What happened to that?
Well, this is, as you know, Andrew, this is a policy that's been with us and it's been controversial in the Labour Party since 1979, I would suggest, and probably before that too. And we've had many, many debates and discussions over it. If Jeremy Corbyn wasn't willing to accept the party's policy, or if I wasn't willing to accept it, then we would clearly have to resign. But we are willing to accept it. Now, if you're then asking whether...
Even though you believe it's immoral?
I believe they're appalling, immoral weapons.
So why would you support something that you believe to be immoral? Because,
Andrew, like Jeremy Corbyn, I'm a Democrat. And I believe that if the majority agrees something, we should abide by the majority. Doesn't morality
trump democracy?
No, it doesn't stop us having our own particular views.
Will you vote for it in Parliament?
No, I voted against it.
No, but will you come if you get elected again on June the 8th, and it comes before Parliament under a Labour government, would you vote for it?
Well, the point is it won't come before Parliament again, will it? Because the decision has now been made. Well, I can't see the circumstances.
So if it did, would you vote for it?
Well, I can't say unless I know what the motion is and what we're being asked to vote on.
This House reaffirms its intention to renew Trident.
You're setting this up as a way of trying to discredit me and obviously my party.
I'm just trying to find out if you're being elected on a manifesto in favour of it, and I'm asking you if it came before the House of Commons after you'd won, would you vote for it?
Well, I disapprove of these weapons, but the fact is we've got them, we've voted to continue to have them, and that is party policy. Until party policy changes, then we will continue to support this in the House. I made a conscientious objection, as did, I think, 50 or 60 other MPs at the time, that we shouldn't have these dreadful weapons. But look, the crucial issue is this, and that's why I'm doing the job that I'm doing, is we should negotiate the reduction internationally in the number of warheads every nuclear nation has.
Well,
that's the best way to get rid of these weapons.
I was going to turn to our others, but you are the Shadow Minister for Disarmament, and you want to negotiate down the number of nuclear weapons.
Correct.
What other nuclear power in the world agrees with you?
I don't know until we start the negotiations, but the United Nations is currently discussing the ban treaty. The treaty, like the treaty on landmines, on chemical and biological weapons.
But let's stick to the nukes at the moment.
No,
Which other nuclear power is either is cutting its nuclear arsenal or actually expanding and modernising it? Who else believes in it?
Well, hang on.
Who are you going to negotiate with?
Let me answer the question. All the powers that have already signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, which was concluded and agreed in 1970, have agreed, the nuclear powers, as part of that treaty obligation, to reduce the number of warheads they have. So Russia's reduced their number of warheads, America's reduced their number of warheads.
And you know why they're doing that?
Too.
Because both America and Russia are modernizing their nuclear arsenals to make them more effective. They don't need as many warheads. Pakistan is going through a massive upgrade of its battlefield nuclear weapons, which has caused a response in India as well, which is upgrading its nuclear weapons. North Korea, I don't even have to tell you about that.
No, you don't.
Who else is going to come to the table with you and get a serious reduction in nuclear weapons as part of your disarmament? Who?
Well, that remains to be seen once the treaty's concluded. But 163 non-nuclear armed nations in the world are actually negotiating this treaty at the United Nations.
Yeah.
And we know that it's a process.
Could you name one country that wants to be involved with you in nuclear disarmament that is a nuclear power?
Not at the moment, of course I can't. But we change the atmosphere and the environment in the world to make these weapons unacceptable, as we did with landmines, as we did with chemical and biological weapons. We made them illegal, and to use them is a war crime. It never was before. Thanks to the UN, it is now. It's a process that takes many years, and we have to start that process, or the world is going to destroy itself.
Julian Lewis, what's wrong with a moral opposition to nuclear weapons?
Well, people take one of two views about the best way to keep peace in the nuclear age. One is that you build up mutual trust and you get rid of mutual fear and suspicion, and you do that by disarming yourself and showing your potential enemies that they've nothing to fear from you. And that is the peace through disarmament approach that you've just heard, and Jeremy, with whom I've debated this many times. The other view is diametrically opposed to that, and it says the best way to keep the peace is to show any potential aggressor that if they attacked you with nuclear weapons, there would be not only unacceptable but also unavoidable retaliation.
Right, I understand that, but it wasn't what I asked you. What I asked you was, what is wrong with a moral opposition to nuclear weapons?
Nothing. What one should have, however, is a moral opposition to nuclear war. Now, if you believe, and hence the relevance, I'm afraid, of my earlier answer, if you believe that the best way to prevent a nuclear war is to disarm, then it's morally right for you to press, as you've just heard Fabian do, for nuclear disarmament. If, like me, you believe that the best way to prevent a nuclear war is to show that if someone attacks you with nuclear weapons, they will get an unacceptable and unavoidable nuclear response, then the moral position to take is to keep the nuclear weapons. And I'm delighted to say that in poll after poll for 30 years or more, 2/3 of the British people agree with my point of view and only 1/4 with Fabian's.
They may agree with you on that as in a majority, but it's not quite an extremist position, is it, to be against nuclear weapons? It doesn't put you beyond the pale. Michael Portillo, former Conservative Defence Secretary, said Trident was, quote, a waste of money, particularly since we now have a minute army and a microscopic navy.
Yes.
He said Crispin Blunt, last chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Tory grandee, he went through the lobbies with Mr. Corbyn last year against Trident.
Yes,
so
he was
there is more. It is not just, if I can put Mr. Corbyn and the CND, who have opposition to the renewal of Trident.
If you had asked me to name any two Conservative politicians who take this point of view, I would have said Michael Portillo and Crispin Blunt. Crispin was the only person to take this point of view, and his view, which I respect, he's an old friend, like me, he's, by the way, an ex-chairman, and I'm an ex-chairman. There's no defence committee at the moment of a committee. The position, actually, is that the people who take the view, there are a few generals, I can name them before you do, if you like, who you can come up with some good quotes to say we don't believe the that we should renew nuclear weapons.
Because they've seen what you've done to the army.
Why do they say that? They say that because they are worried about cuts to conventional forces. Yeah. But if you believe that there should be stronger conventional forces, that is no excuse for leaving your country defenseless against nuclear blackmail, which no amount of conventional weaponry can counter. You can have the strongest conventional forces in the world. You can have the strongest conventional forces. I'll come to that in a second. In the world, I'd like to finish the point. You can be the strongest conventional power in the world, but if your adversary has even a few mass destruction weapons, there's nothing you can do to resist him. Now, yes, we would be part of NATO, and as part of NATO, our nuclear weapons are assigned to the general defence. But the problem about this is that by having our own nuclear weapons, we're able to ensure that if any aggressor were to miscalculate and believe that perhaps, for example, because nuclear weapons hadn't been used in the event of a conventional invasion of the continent, then the Americans might not use them on behalf of Britain standing alone. By Britain having her own nuclear deterrent, nobody can ever be in any doubt that a nuclear attack on this country would lead to unacceptable and unavoidable nuclear response unless Jeremy Corbyn is the Prime Minister, because he has announced in advance that he would not retaliate. Nuclear weapons are in use every day. Their use derives from their deterrent effect in preventing nuclear war, and Jeremy undermines that.
Let me bring in Peter Hennessy. What do you make of the state of our debate now on the renewal of Trident?
Well, it's very interesting. Just to go back to yours and Fabian's discussion, there could well be a vote in the next Parliament on the warheads, because we need a new warhead if we carry on as a country. Because the existing warheads are still...
So the Americans, we build the submarines, the Americans provide the missiles, but we provide the warheads.
Warheads are made in Berkshire, designed in Berkshire at Aldermaston, built at Burfield. And the existing warheads are still viable, as far as I know. One doesn't know about these things unless one's a real insider. But they're getting old, and so there could well be a vote on the warhead. In fact, they will need to be, because it's going to take 17 years to produce the next warhead, according to the Cabinet Office's estimates.
17 years?
17 years. And also the extending of the Vanguard submarine class programme, which Julian's committee has looked at, and I hope he chairs it again when he gets back. We'll need to look at it again. Keeping those boats going until the late 20s, early 2030s is way beyond their planned life. And that's going to take an enormous amount of effort.
The Vanguard are the existing ones?
The existing ones.
But I thought we were building new ones to replace them.
Yes, but you need to keep them going. You need to replace them one by one sequentially.
Right.
And they've been shoved up to the late 20s, early 30s, way beyond their anticipated life. And keeping them going is going to be remarkable. It's a great feat to have kept continuous at-sea deterrence since the 14th of June 1969.
That was Polaris, is that right?
It's a date I always remember because I got married that day, you see. And you'll be pleased to hear that Mrs. Hennessy and I have maintained the marital equivalent of continuous at-sea deterrence.
You've managed to keep continuously married while the Trident or Polaris was being continuously at sea.
You call it Operation Relentless, like the submarines do.
It's classified what I call it.
Let me come back to Fabian Hammond, because it's always difficult when you're not actually in the studio itself. Since the point of the deterrent is that it is a deterrent, and most people, I thought almost everybody hopes that we'd never be in a position where we'd even have to consider using it, but in terms of firing it. But what is the point of a deterrent if the man who would be Prime Minister has already said he won't use it anyway? I mean, surely it loses all deterrent power if you say, well, I'm not going to use it even if we've got it.
Well, I don't see the point of the deterrent myself. But let me just follow Julian's logic, and I have huge respect for the work Julian did as chair of the Defence Select Committee in the last Parliament, and he and I are good friends. But the logic of what he says is that every nation in the world, or every large nation in the world, should have its own independent nuclear deterrent, if what he says is true. But I don't buy that argument. We've heard the Americans say over and over again about their right to bear arms, that it's not guns that kill people, it's people that use guns to kill people. Well, that's the same logic, as it's not about nuclear weapons, it's about nuclear war. You can't have the one without the other, surely. If you didn't have nuclear weapons, you wouldn't have nuclear war.
Well, yes, Japan didn't have nuclear weapons, but you had a nuclear attack because the Americans did. And what you have to ask yourself is, had we got to the 1945 scenario, and if the Japanese had been in a position to retaliate, would Hiroshima and Nagasaki have been attacked? And the answer is no.
Well, we will never know that, of course, thank goodness.
No. All right,
Thank
well,
goodness.
and we won't be able to continue this because we've run out of time, but I thank you, Fabian Hamilton in Leeds, and Julian Lewis here in London. Thank you both.